Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday Night Flock Talk. I'm Robin Sullivan of the Leather Elves, and I am excited to be here. We've got a lot to cover tonight, but I do need to do the usual reminders. For those of you that are regulars, you can like and follow us on Facebook, and then you get notification every time we go live. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Instagram. So, those reminders. The other thing I want to talk about before we start is just a reminder how we handle controversial things here on Friday Night Flock Talk. We like to sometimes tackle those subjects that may not be the easiest for all of us to talk about. As far as tonight's discussion of the USDA regulations, the new ones that have just come out, um, we're not saying that they're good, bad, indifferent, but they are. So we wanted to get that information out there for everyone in aviculture and to let you know what's coming, what's here, and when it's going to go into effect. And the other thing is, aviculturist is a term that we use all the time. Anyone who keeps birds is an aviculturist, whether you are a rescue, a sanctuary, a pet bird owner, a breeder, a conservationist. There are so many different things that fall under the term aviculture. So when we refer to aviculturists, we're talking about all of you. Okay. So I have someone here to help me tonight. And I need to introduce you all to Buddy Waskey. Hey, Buddy, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing good. So, Buddy is one of the best aviculturists I know, and he keeps me on my toes when it comes to um, regulations, whether it be state, local, federal, whatever it may be. But so we've got Buddy with us tonight, and so I'm really excited about that. Thank you for
Thank you
for
for
being
inviting me. Hope I can help you out.
You can. And the other thing is, I know that Adrienne Mock is on. She's on the. I know she's signed on. She's on the comments. She's working on getting this up on her laptop. But Adrienne is. I don't know her title, but she handles legislation for AFA. So, all right. With all that said, that was a mouthful, but I think we need to get started. And hi to everybody that's saying hello. Um, when Buddy and I started talking about this, one of the things that we discussed was terminology. So, Buddy, there's a couple that we really need to talk about. Do you agree? I mean, what would you say are the most important definitions that we need to talk about?
Uh, well, whenever you got regulations or uh, legislation or laws, a lot of it's changed simply by changing the definition. And with the adding of birds to the Animal Welfare Act, that's what they've done. They've taken the current regulation for other animals and they've changed some of the definitions to include birds.
Okay.
And uh,
So,
the first one is pet animals.
and I think Nick, you have that one, the definition of pet animal. So I'll read it, so you guys don't have to read. The animal welfare regulations define a pet animal as any animal that has commonly been kept as a pet in family households in the United States, such as dogs, cats, guinea pigs, rabbits, hamsters, and birds. This term also includes, but is not limited to, such birds as canaries, cockatiels, lovebirds, and budgerigar parakeets. This term excludes exotic animals and wild animals. So, so just that piece right there. Um, what do we what do we need to say about that, buddy?
Well, this is the the first thing that came out in the general regulation, and when you read it at first, when you understand it, it's really concerning. It just includes canaries, cockatiels, lovebirds, and parakeets or budget guard parakeets as pet animals. And we all know that there are more birds that are pet animals than just these four species. The last line, this term excludes exotic animals and wild animals. So what happens is if they're not listed in this list of these four, they're considered exotic and wild animals, and uh, it's handled differently. But
Mhm.
also in this, it says not limited to. So
Right.
with the not limited to, there's been a list that's been added to it, and we'll get to that later, I guess. But when anything in the regulation says pet animal or pet bird, just because it's your bird does not mean it's a pet under their
And,
definition.
and I
And
think
it's
too, it says here too, it defines what avian species are considered pet bird species and categorizes what pet bird species are small or large. And we will get into that further down the road. But Chris asks, but doesn't not limited to mean you can add to it at any time? No, it's not that a change can be made at any time. It's just that that's the list that the original list, and you'll see too, and like Buddy said, we'll get to the list in a bit, but the list is really a moving target. Am I right, Buddy?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
It's it's the list has been ongoing, and hopefully we'll get more species added to it. Uh, but um, we'll discuss that when we get to it.
okay.
So
And Chris also asked, aren't all pets considered property and fall under property laws?
yes, but um, laws, they conflict. The first thing I brought up on this is the Lacey Act uh, says that all parrots are domesticated and they're pets, or they're domesticated. So my first thing was, well, all parrots ought to go on this list. Well, USDA doesn't have to match the Lacey Act. So it's Chris is right. All air animals, like it or not like it, they're property. They're no different than a vehicle or a furniture in a house or anything. They're property. But under the Animal Welfare Act, it's different.
And I think that's part of one of the things that is a big issue in the bird community has always been the divisions between the different, I won't say factions, but the different groups. And I think all of us have the same mission, and that's good quality of life, good animal welfare for these animals that are in our lives in one way or another. And I think the animal welfare regulations are what kind of oversees all that, the good husbandry, the good, housing and enrichment and things like that. And you'll see, like I said, good, bad, or indifferent, they're here. This is what we're dealing with at this point in time. And I really want to them have us be prepared rather than react when suddenly we figure out that, oh no, we're the ones that are going to have to be regulated, and act then. So Kim says, BS, they aren't domesticated. Well, I think we a lot of people would agree with you, Kim. And I think but as a I'm not saying that we're going to stop advocating for the rights of for us to own our pets and the rights for us to have animals in our lives. I just think that fight will go on, but we still need to kind of address what we need to do at this point in time. I mean, do you agree, Buddy?
Yes, and for the purpose of the Animal Welfare Act, the more birds that are pets and considered domesticated, the better, because these can be excluded. And as we get to the end, hopefully you'll understand this better. So, um, you know, the big parrots, macaws, and all, they're considering them as pets right now at this point. So, whether domesticated or not doesn't have a bearing on this at this point.
Right. All right. So, Buddy, are there what other terms do we need to go over before we get into the meat of things?
A big one is retail pet store.
Yeah.
Yep.
So here's the definition. Retail pet store means a place of business or residence at which the seller, buyer, and the animal available for sale are physically present so that every buyer may personally observe the animal prior to purchasing and or taking custody of that animal after purchase, and where only the following animals are sold or offered for sale at retail for use as pets. And then they list dogs, cats, rabbits, guinea pigs, hamsters, gerbils, rats, mice, gophers, chinchillas, domesticated ferrets, domesticated farm type animals, birds, and cold blooded species. Such definition excludes, and then it goes on, there are some exclusions to that. But this is really, really important. And it says any establishment exhibiting pet animals in a room that is separate from or adjacent to the retail pet store or in an outside area or anywhere off the retail pet store premises. Okay, so Buddy, do you want to kind of tell us what that really means?
The pet store number 5.
Well, we can start with pet store and then go to number 5.
Okay, the reason pet store is so important with this new regulation is, and a lot of people are not going to agree with this, and Robin's probably not want to address it. If it is retail, a retail pet store or retail from a residence, it is the facility is excluded, and this includes sanctuaries and rescues. So, for the purpose of USDA, if somebody can come under the classification of retail pet store, they do not have to be licensed and or inspected. And whether somebody's inspected or not, or excluded or not, doesn't mean necessarily that they're doing things better or not as good. And if somebody has problems getting licensed, doesn't mean they don't have a good facility. It could just be simple as not being able to get their paperwork straight.
Mhm.
But anyway, so the more people or facilities that can be considered retail pet stores, the better. Number 5, the reason we have that in there is um, some pet stores, they might have animals in 2 or 3 places, but this or in the outside areas they said here, that is excluded from the retail pet store definition. Also, rescues and sanctuaries that have birds in multiple places will be excluded. So if a rescue or sanctuary uses a foster program, this is something the USDA, maybe they'll change on later or whatever, but the way this is written, they're not going to be able to come under the retail pet exemption, and they're going to have to be licensed. And personally, I want any and everybody we can to be excluded and not have to be licensed, because USDA does not have they haven't received any extra money or any extra inspectors or whatever to handle this, and I they're not going to be able to do it. So I'm trying to let people know so that people can be excluded. So
Chris, yeah, Chris just asked about the quantity thresholds. Chris, we will get to that. Okay. I think, Buddy, that was it. Was that it for definitions?
yeah, as
Okay.
far as the retail pet store goes, the quantity or person retailing from their home or their facility, a breeder can retail, directly out of their facility, out of their home. But for the purpose of this, the quantities and the thresholds really don't make any difference. So a pet store can sell 1,000 birds a year and still be excluded if they meet the definition of a pet store. And when they're
And
excluded, they don't have to do any documentation. They don't have to prove the numbers they're selling or anything.
right.
So
And I think the a big piece of this is that face-to-face piece, and I
it
think, that's key in this definition.
it is, and our meetings with USDA, Zoom meetings, our face-to-face meetings, they made it very clear. And sometimes we'd mention a situation and all. The first thing that Dr. Yeager would say, well, do they ship? When we started talking about people that show birds, do they ship? And so uh, it's the face-to-face part is very important. And with this retail pet store exemption, it gives most rescues and sanctuaries opportunity to be excluded from this. They won't have to be licensed.
I it's so, Allie saying any person caring for a bird should be followed to be sure they adhere to a bare minimum of quality care, store or sanctuary. We need to ensure the safety. We absolutely do, Allie. I agree with you, 100% that we do need to ensure quality care. Um, but I think when we're looking at this regulation right now, we're looking at how it's affecting, each different kind of entity. And we'll talk too about how it could affect individual pet owners as well. So the next thing
Um,
we want to do is, yep, go ahead, buddy.
yeah, alleys in New Jersey. New Jersey requires a permit for nearly all birds. So there's opportunity for New Jersey to follow through on that. Uh,
Right.
but USDA does not have the facility to inspect a couple. Does not have the resources to inspect a couple 100,000 uh, people that breed birds a year. And that's why they got to some of these exemptions in. Congress hadn't allocated any money for this. They got 109 inspectors in the U.S. and they don't even have one for Puerto Rico, but they're trying to find one just because of birds in Puerto Rico, USDA inspectors. So they're not getting any additional resources, and for it to be any positive results from this, it's got to be practical.
So we've got questions coming up. I'm going to hold the questions, but I will make note of them and make sure that we get back to them. Okay, just so we can get through the information in the time that we have, because we don't. I know there have been some discussions of this online that have taken 3 hours, and as much as we love you guys, Buddy and I do need to have a Friday night. So
Um,
Nick.
exhibitor.
Okay, exhibitor, right. That's the last definition we wanted to go over. So the exhibitor, Nick, do we have that? Okay. Exhibitor means any person, public or private, exhibiting any animals which were purchased in commerce or the intended distribution of which affects commerce or will affect commerce to the public for compensation as determined by the secretary. This term includes carnivals, circuses, animal acts, including free flighted bird shows, zoos, and educational exhibits, exhibiting such animals, whether operated for profit or not. This term excludes retail pet stores, horse, dog, and pigeon races, an owner of a common domesticated household pet who derives less than a substantial portion of income from a non primary source, as determined by the secretary, for exhibiting an animal that exclusively resides at the residence of the pet owner, organizations sponsoring, and all persons participating in state and county fairs, livestock shows, rodeos, field trials, coursing events, falconry, purebred dog and cat shows, bird fancier shows, and any other fairs or exhibitions intended to advance agricultural arts and sciences as may be determined by the secretary. So there's a lot of exclusion there, but they're pretty specific. Wouldn't you say so, buddy?
Yes. And then some of the inclusions, one of the biggest one on exhibiting here, and David Garcia, that's OPA's lawyer, didn't understand this, including free flight shows. I begged Dr. Yeager to leave that out because exhibiting is exhibiting, doesn't make any difference. The birds being free flown, whether they're riding a bicycle or they're on exhibit. But anyway, if you free fly your birds, you do not have to be USDA inspected unless you're doing shows. That's why shows are in there. So unless you're out doing shows for a group, uh, you do not have to be licensed. And there is some exclusions on that. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But also, it says educational exhibits. So it's a potential for people that go to schools having to be licensed. And I don't remember, somewhere in there even it speaks of social media. If you're doing stuff on social media, you could be considered exhibiting and have to be licensed. Um, this is real broad, but when we get to the exclusions, this will help a lot of people out here. Um, Rescues and sanctuaries that open their doors to the public uh, are not excluded.
Because that's considered, there's a question about tours, and that's exactly what Buddy's talking about. Is if you are a rescue sanctuary facility that houses and rehomes birds, and you have an open house, if you have, there are numbers that are involved, but chances are you have more than that, minimum or that maximum number of birds to be exhibited, and you are now considered exhibiting those birds to the public. And if you do tours of your facility, you have people coming through on Saturdays and Sundays, whatever, to take a look at all the good work you're doing. That is considered exhibiting as well. So that's a biggie. That's one of the things that when we're talking about this, there was a lot of talk about rescues being excluded and sanctuaries being excluded, but there are things that go with that, that will kick it into that other category. So that's just something to think about. So Nick, we've got this is on the USDA site. You can view these videos. We thought we would pull out some clips from them. This is the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. That's the QR code that will take you there. But we do have the first video from Dr. Yeager that we can put up there, Nick, if that
Rule
will work.
on February 22nd, 2022, and received over 19,000 comments from stakeholders, avian industry groups, and the general public. All substantive comments were given careful consideration and used to inform the development of the final rule, which was published on February 21st of this year. We understand these new regulations will bring a lot of questions, and our intent is to address those questions and concerns in these videos and resources on our website. If you still have questions after reviewing the material, please reach out to us at animalcare@usda.gov or call us at 970-494-7478. On our website, we have 4 videos, including this introduction, that will orient you to the resources available. The second video, titled "Do I Need a USDA License or Registration for My Avian Use Activities?" covers who needs a license or registration with Animal Care. If after reviewing this video you still have questions regarding whether or not you need a license or registration, please don't hesitate to contact us by the email address or phone number provided above. The third video provides you with the step-by-step instructions on applying for a license or registration. And the fourth video goes over the avian welfare regulations and informs you how to prepare for your first pre-license inspection. We also have a frequently asked questions page on our website. Let's talk about timing and when you will be required to have a license or registration. If you currently hold an animal care license or registration because you already conduct regulated activities with covered mammalian species, you have until August 21st, 2023 to become compliant with these new avian welfare regulations. You are not required to apply for a new license before your current license expires, and you do not need to re-register. However, animal care inspections conducted on or after August 21st, 2023 will include all covered birds at your facility. On the other hand, if you are not already licensed or registered with Animal Care, you may conduct covered avian activity without a license or registration until February 21st, 2024. If you would like to continue to conduct covered activity under the new regulations, you must obtain a license or registration by February 21st, 2024. Please note, when applying for a license, we recommend doing so at least 90 days before the deadline to ensure there is adequate time to process your application and schedule your pre-license inspection, which you must pass to receive a license. For annual reports at research facilities, reporting will begin in the fiscal year 2024, so you will need to report the total number of covered birds used in research at the end of the fiscal year 2024. Animal Care is dedicated to ensuring all individuals impacted by these new regulations are afforded an adequate amount of time to engage in dialogue with us regarding the application of these requirements and to ask questions, get answers, and become compliant before the deadlines. APHIS is also committed to providing outreach and education on this final rule to all those who may be affected. As noted, if you have any questions regarding these new regulations, please contact our office at 970-494-7478 or email us at animalcare@usda.gov. I hope you found this information helpful. Thank you for your time today. We hope you enjoyed.
Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that, he says. And so, right, one of the important things was the when it goes into effect. And Buddy, Chris had asked, the dates have changed according to David. Do you know anything about that?
No,
Okay.
I did notice. I don't know. Maybe I hadn't seen it. It said the end of 2024, and I think that's for facilities that do research. But this thing in the last 2 weeks is just changing a couple times a day. One of them is the list of pet birds. So,
Okay. All right. So Chris, as far as Buddy and I know, I don't have a different date, but if we find out that, there is a change in that, we will, excuse me, I'll put it, we'll post it in the comments, on the page. So, that was pretty much what we wanted to talk about. We wanted to show you from that video. Nick, do we have that, the second video? This is a little bit more about who's affected.
Hello, my name is Dr. Cody Yeager, the Avian Field Specialist in APHIS Animal Care. In this video, we will review the types of activities involving birds that require a USDA Animal Care license or registration. A license and/or a registration may be required depending on the types of activities you are carrying out involving birds. For businesses that breed, sell, or broker the sale of or exhibit birds, a license may be required. For businesses that are involved in the transportation of birds owned by someone else or conduct research involving birds, a registration may be required. There are three types of licenses: Class A licenses are for people breeding and selling birds hatched on their property. Class B licenses are for people who purchase and then resell birds that were not hatched on their property. And Class C licenses are for those who exhibit birds to the public. We will review the registration types later on in this presentation. A person applying for a new license must submit an application and undergo an inspection to demonstrate full compliance with the regulations before a license is issued. There is no pre-registration inspection when applying for a registration. For more information on the application process, please refer to our third video that goes over step-by-step instructions on how to apply for a license or registration. Now let's discuss exemptions and thresholds for licensure as it relates to birds. It's always helpful to first start with activities that are not covered under the Animal Welfare Act. Avian use activities that do not require a license or registration includes birds solely used or intended to be used for food, fiber, or improving animal nutrition, breeding management, or production efficiency, or for improving the quality of food or fiber. In other words, birds used for typical farm or agricultural purposes are not covered under the Animal Welfare Act. Other activities that are not covered include exhibition of exclusively domesticated farm-type animals that are intended to advance the agricultural arts and sciences, birds used in falconry or used to promote falconry, birds used in pigeon races or bird fancier shows, and birds kept solely for an individual's own use or enjoyment. This includes persons who free fly their own birds solely for their own use and enjoyment. Anyone who sells regulated birds that were hatched on their property for use as a pet or for exhibition must be licensed unless they fall under one of the license exemptions. Most breeders selling their birds hatched on their property will fall into this Class A type of licensure. Now, let's look at the licensing thresholds for Class A licenses, which are required when selling birds for use as pets or for exhibition that were hatched on your premises. If you sell more than 200 pet bird species having an average body weight of 250 grams or less annually, or if you sell more than 8 pet bird species having an average body weight of more than 250 grams annually, a license is required. For these purposes, body weights are those of the average adult for that species. As examples, pet birds at or below 250 grams typically include cockatiels, finches, lovebirds, and parakeets, while pet birds over 250 grams typically include most cockatoos and macaws, Amazons, and African gray parrots. Pet bird species are defined by the regulations as those that have been commonly kept as pets in U.S. households. Please see our complete list of pet birds defined on our website titled Species List of Pet Birds as Defined by the Animal Welfare Regulations. Sales of birds of any species not on this list requires a license regardless of the size or number sold annually, unless already exempted from licensure. As established by the Retail Pet Store Rule, pet species of birds that are sold in face-to-face transactions in which the seller, buyer, and pet bird are all physically present at the time of sale are exempted from licensure. This includes pet bird sales at pet stores or bird shows. Brokers selling pet birds and businesses selling non-pet bird species must be licensed unless exempted from licensure. Face-to-face retail pet bird sales are also exempted from the size and number thresholds covered on the previous slide. Additionally, You may conduct sales of pet bird species by both face-to-face sales and non-face-to-face sales without a license, as long as those non-face-to-face sales are below the size and number threshold covered on the previous slide. For sales of any non-pet bird species, the seller must have proper permits from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as any permits required by the state and local governments, if applicable. Anyone who resells or negotiates the purchase or sale of regulated birds as a dealer, also called brokering, must be licensed as a Class B dealer, unless they fall under one of the license exemptions. Class B dealers can include brokers, auctions, and some rescues. USDA considers compensation to include any remuneration for the animal, regardless of whether or not it is for profit or not for profit. Remuneration includes, but is not limited to, sales, adoption fees, donations, or other benefits received for related activities. Anyone engaged in any of these activities and receiving remuneration may meet the definition of a dealer. Finally, let's discuss the Class C license for animal exhibition. The Animal Welfare Act defines an exhibitor as any person, public or private, exhibiting any animals which were purchased in commerce or the intended distribution of which affects commerce or will affect commerce to the public for compensation. Examples involving birds include carnivals, circuses, animal acts, zoos, educational exhibits, petting zoos, public walk-in aviaries, photo shoots with birds, and birds being given away as prizes or used to attract business. Unless exempted for reasons we have already reviewed, a license is required if you are exhibiting more than 8 pet animals, including pet bird species, small exotic or wild mammals, and/or domesticated farm-type animals, including birds such as poultry. Additionally, you may exhibit up to 4 raptors without a license. In all other circumstances, exhibition of any non-pet bird species requires a license. In summary, the exhibition of 8 or fewer pet bird species or 4 or fewer raptors is exempted from licensure. Some businesses conduct multiple types of regulated activity, such as selling offspring of animals that they also use for exhibition. You are not required to have multiple licenses because each class of license allows you to conduct other types of regulated activity. The primary activity for which the birds are used determines what class of license you will need. We will now review the registration types. Remember, there is
Actually,
no fee or
I
pre-registration
think Betty, we
inspection
can
when applying
stop
for a
this here.
registration.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to tackle in what we just the other part of what was just there. Um, but I think one of the most important things that I got out of that, and I think you as well, buddy, is that it's any remuneration. It's not just I sold you a bird. It's you adopted a bird for me and there was an adoption fee. I donated and I got a bird. Um, can you think of any other scenarios? But because I think that's critical for everybody who's listening. Because I'm looking at the list of who's listening, and there are a lot of rescues and sanctuaries on there. And I think that this is where you guys need to pay attention. What do you think, buddy?
Yeah. What most rescues need to do in sanctuaries are they need to try to fall under the classification of retail pet store. And by doing that, they will not have to be licensed. Even under retail pet store, people can come in. If you're actually selling birds, which the rescues and sanctuaries saying they're adopting them out, rehoming them, or whatever. But if they actually got birds leaving their facility, they need to do what it takes to be considered a retail pet store, and then they will be excluded. The only thing that will get most rescues and sanctuaries out of this exemption is exhibiting. They can exhibit from their facility if it's a retail pet store, because they have that in the definition of retail pet store. People coming through and looking is part of the sales process. But if a rescue or sanctuary has an open house, and let's say a sanctuary that doesn't sell birds, if they have an open house, they're going to have to be licensed. Or if a rescue goes to a school and does exhibits, they could be considered an exhibitor. But the way to not be considered exhibitor is look at the exemption for exhibitor, which would be eight animals or less, and that's animals. That's not just birds. So if you're carrying your hedgehog and your puppy in there, they count as two animals. So
And
um,
I'm looking at the comments, buddy, and I know, Jennifer Bravo, she said she's a rescue and she doesn't mind being organized. And I mean being not being organized, being licensed. And I think this is great. And I'm not Buddy and I are not saying in any way, shape, or form that this is, an issue for any one particular group. It's just for a long time, the focus has been on the breeder portion of aviculture, and that's who's going to have to follow these rules, and we're all good. All of us are affected, and it's really just again, we want people to be aware so it doesn't catch you off guard. I see that Chris Armstrong's on here. Chris, if you're taking more than 8 birds out to fly, you're exhibiting. People are there to see you fly your birds. And I think it's, you've got to stay. And the thing is, people say, well, oh, I only took 8, but it's got to be the same 8, because that period doesn't end with each event you do. It's got to be the same 8 that go out at all time. And yeah, Jennifer, I know, that it's not about wanting to be exempt. I think it's, you know, you are all for it, and I absolutely applaud you for that. But it's that it's they're not trying to trip anybody up. It's just the way sometimes these regulations are written that we have we have to decipher them at some point in time, and that's something that gets missed, because it's if a rescue or a sanctuary says, or a rehoming organization says, no, we don't charge, we charge an adoption fee, and the adoption fee only covers the food and the vet bills while they were here. That's all well and good, but it's still going to be seen as commerce. So
um,
just
a, a rescue or sanctuary, if they give a bird to a volunteer, that's considered commerce. And so that opens it up, you know, other avenues. Also, here in a minute, we're going to have the pet bird list, and hopefully they add to it. I'm going to beat up on one species, hawk-head parrots. There, very few people argue that they're not commonly kept as pets. Most babies end up in a pet home. They're not on the list that we'll show in just a little bit. So if a rescue has a hawk head and they exhibit that hawk head, or they rehome that hawk head, they're going to have to be licensed. One bird in 1 year will make you have to be licensed if it's not on the pet bird list.
And I think in it, Buddy and I were talking about this the other day, and that's going to lead to issues down the line, because what's going to happen then is we're going to have hawkheads ending up in sanctuary, or not necessarily sanctuary, but in rescues where they're trying to rehome birds, and they're not going to be able to leave those facilities. And then we're going to
Also,
have, go ahead.
also, I'm afraid that we're going to have the unintended consequences of it, like the Endangered Species Act does, is people working with certain species, they can't sell them. I'm not going to get licensed to sell my hawk heads. So then people can't get breeding stock. And
That's true.
somebody just said something about 900 pages. I think we're going to put the exact page numbers to go to, but it's only about 10 or 12 pages that actually got the there's the page numbers right there on the Federal
So,
Registry.
Jennifer, you can stop sweating. So it's not that the rest isn't important, but the meat of it that really needs your focus is on those Federal Register pages. And
The,
Chris says 212 to 235. The other thing is, Chris mentions too things like myna birds and West Indian magpies. A lot of those do come into sanctuary and rescue down in Florida, and those are not being addressed at this point in time. So the all right, so that's that kind of section. It is really dry. It's painful. It's absolutely painful. But we're going to move on. And again, this is the down and dirty quick version. And we're already 45 minutes in. But Nick, we've got clips from that third video, and can we pull those up and then we can just go over them really quickly? I hate to do
Now
it
let's
quickly,
go
but
over the general housing regulations found in 3.50. Housing facilities refers to land, premises, a shed, barn, or building, or any other structure housing animals. The housing facilities must be structurally sound and in good repair for the birds to be housed inside. The facilities must protect the birds from injury, restrict other animals from entering that may negatively affect the birds, and securely contain all the birds. If you have any flightless or flight-restricted birds that roam freely on the grounds, you must provide protected areas, such as a coop, when the birds are not being monitored. Surfaces within the housing facilities must be readily cleaned and sanitized or replaced when worn or soiled. Interior surfaces where birds have access to must be non-toxic, free from rust that affects the structural integrity of the surfaces or prevents cleaning, and free of jagged edges or sharp points that could injure the birds. Food, bedding, and husbandry supplies must be stored in a way that protects the supplies from deterioration, contamination, and vermin infestation. Food and supplies must be stored off the floor and away from the walls to allow cleaning and monitoring for pest activity. Harmful cleaning supplies must not be stored inside the food storage and food preparation areas, but may be stored in cabinets in the animal areas, provided that they are in properly labeled containers and are adequately secured to prevent potential harm to the birds. I recommend not keeping cleaning supplies above your bird's food or food prep area, and make sure the containers do not leak. There must also be regular and frequent removal of waste. This includes animal and food waste, substrate, debris, garbage, wastewater, and any other fluids and waste in a manner that minimizes contamination and disease risk. Drainage systems must be in place to allow waste and water to be rapidly eliminated to minimize pests, prevent odors and disease risks, and allow the birds to remain dry. Depending on where you keep your birds, Section 3.151 lists the requirements for indoor housing of birds, while Section 3.152 is applicable for outdoor housing. For indoor housing, you must ensure that air temperature and humidity are appropriate for your birds. The space must be sufficiently ventilated with minimal drafts to prevent the birds' distress, accumulation of moisture condensation, and other noxious gases. You must also provide appropriate lighting, either by natural or artificial means, to allow for routine inspections and cleaning. For birds with pools or other aquatic areas, there must be sufficient vertical airspace above the area to allow for behaviors typical of that species, such as diving or swimming. For outdoor housing, birds must be housed and acclimated to the temperature, including all aquatic areas and humidity levels, as to not adversely affect the bird's health and comfort. You must also provide shelter as appropriate for the local climate to protect all birds from any adverse weather conditions. Furthermore, shelters must be adequately ventilated, have shade, and provide protection to prevent the birds' discomfort from direct sunlight, precipitation, or wind. Shelters must also comfortably contain all the birds at one time, without causing interest-specific aggression or grouping of non-compatible birds. Section 3.153 provides you with the regulations on the primary enclosure, which is the structure that directly contains the bird or birds. You will notice there are similarities between these regulations in Section 3.153 with the general housing facility regulations listed in 3.150 that we have already covered. The primary enclosure must be structurally sound and kept in good repair. The enclosure must protect the birds from injury and have no sharp points or edges. The flooring of the primary enclosure must be constructed in a manner that protects the bird's feet and legs from injury. If the flooring is suspended, it must be sufficiently rigid to prevent excess sagging under the bird's weight. Perches and any other objects used to enrich the bird's environment inside the enclosure must be species appropriate and be designed, constructed, and maintained to prevent harm to the birds. In summary, you must be continually evaluating your bird's enclosure for safety and maintenance concerns. This includes significant rust on the cages, broken latches, areas where the bird's feet, beak, or wing could become entrapped, and toys or perches that are significantly worn. The primary enclosure must contain all the birds securely, while also restricting entry of animals that may negatively affect the birds. Birds must always have the option to remain clean and dry. You must provide the birds with easy and convenient access to clean food and potable water. All surfaces in contact with the birds must be readily cleaned and or sanitized or be replaced when worn or soiled. For enclosures that house birds that rest by perching, there must be perches available that are appropriate to the age and species of the birds housed inside, while also having a sufficient number of perches of appropriate size, shape, strength, texture, and placement to comfortably hold all the birds in the primary enclosure at the same time, including birds that are ranked low in the dominance hierarchy. So what about enclosure sizing? There
Hey,
are
Nick,
no specific size requirements
can you
for
pause
enclosure.
at this point? Yeah, there we go. So that's a lot of information. I will say, and I think, Buddy, you'll agree with me, a lot of that is common sense. A lot of that is things that, we're already doing and facilities are already doing. It's just, it's kind of laid out for you in those regulations. Do you agree?
Yes. Before I
Okay.
forget, there's one other point I want to bring up. Uh, that on exhibiting, there are a lot of people that are truly pet people, and they truly do this because they want to educate people, and there's no commerce. But if you're doing, they call it outreaches or whatever, going to schools, only exhibit the 8 animals or the 8 birds, because you don't want to be uh, pulled in as an exhibitor. And all it takes is one person making a phone call to USDA. And I thought about this and wanted to reinforce it, because I got 2 friends that every weekend they take their birds to different bird march, exotic shows, schools, events, festivals, and we've talked about this a lot. And they're going to pick the 8 birds that do this the best, and they're the only 8 birds they're going to use. So anyway, I kind of interrupted with that, Robin.
No, and Buddy, the question came up too about whether you had to be paid as an exhibitor for to fall under that regulation.
It says even not for pay, so you could be doing it out of goodness of your heart and not getting any money, and you could fall into that exemption. You fall out of that exemption, and got to remember the list that we're going to bring up here in just a minute. All you got to do is take one bird out that's not on that list as pet bird. You take that hawkhead out, and you're supposed to be licensed. And so that's something you have to watch. But also, the 8 pet birds that sit in there in the definition of exhibitor are not a substantial amount of your income or revenues or whatever. So if you got a regular job and you're doing this 2 weekends a month, I doubt that that's more than a substantial amount of your income.
Right. So thank you for bringing that up, Buddy. On the housing piece that we just watched, I think what I would suggest is go through that video again. You can do that on USDA. Go through that video again and really kind of create a checklist for yourself, because what this all comes down to is really good documentation and good record keeping, and just kind of following the steps that they are laying out for you, which again, I think a lot of us are doing already. I think, you know, um, or at least trying to do. Maybe some of us need to step up our game a little bit, but I think it's really things that have been being done anyway. We just need to kind of put it down on paper and say, look, this is how we do it. Um, Nick, I had asked Nick to pull out the environmental enhancement section as well, but we don't need to. We're kind of short on time, but there is an environmental enhancement, which is fancy for enrichment. And what that comes down to is you need to have a plan in place. And because, from one facility to the next, enrichment looks different. And it's not, people are getting really uptight. And I talked to a couple of rescues recently, and they're like, well, we can't go out and buy new toys every single week, and they get tore up and they this and they that. I wish that the USDA was saying that's what we had to do as a toy manufacturer, but that's not what they're saying. And what they're saying is there has to be mental and physical stimulation. So, I'm working with some facilities trying to figure out how we're going to get that on paper. It's just got to be recorded. And they suggest in some of the things I was reading that you refer to, it's form 7050. And it's interesting because I pulled it up and I don't know if here we go. If you look at it, so you can use form 7050. And if you look at what this is, too close. It's for non-human primates. So they just haven't updated them yet, but the gist of it is the same. And, they're looking for you to develop, document, and follow species appropriate environmental enhancement plan. So you've really got to think about what kind of birds am I housing and holding at my facility? And then how do I create species appropriate? And just look at what you're doing already and then put it down on paper. You've got to explain when you look at these forms, like the first ones don't apply because it's, what's non-human primate species do you house? But it says things like, describe how the housing provides opportunities to express species typical postures and positions. Yeah, chop is considered enrichment. Fresh food is considered enrichment. Varying food, using foraging, using task-oriented feeding methods. Those interactions with the caregiver. If you go in and walk through your aviary and you talk to the birds, there you go. You can check that one off the list. Swings, mirrors, perches, changing up perches. So all of that is something you can put down on your plan. And like I said, I'm working on some ways to kind of document that and make it easy to document. And it's based on the needs, the specific needs of the bird. Then there's a section here that says if you've got birds with psychological distress evident by behavior or appearance. So again, I don't know that we can read their minds, but their appearance or their behavior is showing you that they are psychologically distressed. You need to give special attention to those birds. If they should be able to see or hear compatible species, that's easy, right? If you're running a facility, or even if you're fostering and you have a lot of birds in your home, you're probably doing that already. Okay. So if you've got a bird that's over preening, if you've got a bird that's, got some physical issue going on, you just need to provide, pluckers. I was trying to be nice, Lori McFarland. But if you've got pluckers, you will need to provide a little extra and explain why you're providing what you're providing. So there's a lot that goes into that. I suggest watching that third video. Buddy, you've watched the whole thing. I think people need to watch
Right.
that. Will give them, some more answers to what they need to be doing. But Buddy, from your perspective, how can people, I want to talk about documentation. How can people put this together easily, so that they've got it right there? What would you suggest people do or think about when they're creating a
I
system?
suggest they use the forms that USDA have. Some of them aren't avian specific at this point, but the records for your birds, it's not records like your vet or zoo would want you to keep. The basic records for your birds are more of an inventory. So
Mhm.
we use a file for our large macaws. Each bird's got a paper file. On the file, it has their species. Every one of our birds has a name, like a people name or whatever. And nearly all of them have leg band numbers, and all of them have microchips. But so all you got to do is keep like a running inventory, and the forms are for USDA. So you have a form for acquisitions. So any birds that's given to you, you buy or hatch goes on that. You got a disbursement form. Any bird that passes away, is given away, sold, traded, goes on that form. And that keeps your inventory up. But when this first started, people thought that they wanted to see pedigrees and stuff like that. That's not the case. Real quick, back to the enrichment. I believe that comes under your veterinary care program. So your attending veterinarian will have input on that. And the attending veterinarian, we could just about do a whole night on that, but that is not as complicated as people think it is either. There's 2 or 3 or 4 veterinarians I know of, avian vets, and they don't have to be avian vets to do this, that are writing up programs, animal care programs, and they'll help you with your enrichment, cage size, and such not.
Mhm. And I think too, I'm more than happy to work with facilities to kind of figure this out. And I think it's important, if you're working with a staff of people, that you have a place where they can all kind of enter the information in one spot. So it's not, oh, that's in Mary's desk drawer, or that's in, Susie's, let's be honest, the back of her car. That's a good place to keep records. No, it's not. because then you got to go find them when you have your inspection. But you want it to be easily accessible and all in one place and organized. And Chris is right, a paper trail. And Jennifer says binder and whiteboards. Those are the kind of things. This should not cost you a fortune to get ready for this kind of stuff. And Carrie asked, so I think, we're going to put up the list of pet birds as is. And I say as is because we do know, like I said, it's a moving target. But we're going to probably open it up for questions, and we're not going to do questions all night because, again, I don't know, Buddy, have you had dinner yet? Because for those of you that don't know Buddy, he
Yes.
gets a little hangry. Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
So Carrie Ellen says, if they're not banded, do they have to microchip?
They give you 3 options. The birds in your facility, the cages can be labeled. And what they ask to be on the label is more than a label, it's just about a book. They want the number of birds, identifying features of the bird, species of the birds. It was a few other things. I would recommend microchipping if they're not banded. You can open band them. They don't have to be closed band. But microchips, I haven't tried this brand, but I saw them on Amazon, a 20 pack. The reviews on them were so for under $2. They're cheaper. Microchips often are cheaper than a stainless steel leg band. So, and the thing to do with your microchips is talk to your attending veterinarian, buy them yourself, and see if your attending veterinarian will help you put them in. And you only have to put them in one time. But if you're going to go do microchips and carry them to the first vet down the street, they're going to charge you probably $50 to $300, $400. Some of the vets insist on putting the birds to sleep while they put the microchips in, and you're going to end up getting a $300 or $400 charge for microchip. But if you provide the microchip and work with the vet, you can probably work out something else. But I'm a big proponent of microchips. All their large macaws are microchipped. Our blue throats, when they leave our facility, they're microchipped. The babies are. So I do believe that any birds that you sell are going to have identifying features. I might be wrong on that. So they might need me. The simplest thing to do, especially like a rescue or a pet store, might be to do is just open band them. And open bands were hard to get. Now they're coming more available. AFA has open bands, and there's a couple other companies that have them.
So, questions, and I know your heads are probably swimming. This is there's a lot of information here. And I really do suggest that you at least read the pages that we put up on the screen. Nick, can we put that QR code up again? There we go. At least look at those pages. If you are having trouble and you have insomnia, read the rest of it. If you're a visual kind of person, watch those videos and take notes on the videos. They're longer than what we've showed you tonight. There's more involved, but those were the highlights that we wanted to touch on. But there is a lot of work involved in getting ready for this. But I think once you get ready, once you get your kind of act together and get your documentation down and how you're going to do it and what your system's going to be, I think that will it'll become easier, and it will actually make things a little more organized for you as a facility. So Buddy, we talked about rescues, we talked about sanctuaries, we talked about breeders. The average pet bird owner, in your opinion, how is this going to affect them?
The pessimistic side of me thinks that it's going to increase the price of pet birds. It's going to make some species unavailable if they're not listed on this list that we're about to put up there. your local pet store, your local breeder can't sell them to you unless they're willing to be USDA licensed. So, if you got somebody that's just working with hawkheads, I'm picking on that species, but there's several thousands that are left off of this list. Um, they're not going to be able to sell them, and so I think that's going to affect stuff. Um, um, that's how it affect pet bird people, and they're probably going to be, for a few years at least, there probably might be a shortage of birds, and we might see the price of birds be higher than they were 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Um,
And,
and
I
the
think it will affect.
pessimistic side of me says that you'll see Congo grays for 15,000. 2 years ago, we sold Congo grays retailing for 10,000 in some markets. So I think in a couple of years, when this all settles out, that you're going to see the price of some birds go up. Also, I think you might see some mature birds, the price of them get really low. You'll see breeders that might be wanting to get out of their business. So you might see mature birds, breeding birds, get inexpensive.
Yeah. We have a question. Why wouldn't they want to be licensed? So, Nicole, I think there are some facilities that are maybe flying under the radar, and it's a matter of being regulated, having the industry regulated, and there are some that may be falling a bit short, and it may be that they don't have the staffing to do the documentation. There really isn't a good reason to want
Well,
to go ahead, buddy.
I'll give a couple examples. If you got a facility, indoor, outdoor, you got to have a drainage system. I don't know if that drainage system actually has to go into a septic system. They do with dogs. It has to go into some kind of septic system, a drain field, a lagoon, or something. But there are facilities. I know of indoor facilities that it's not practical to put in a drainage system. At one point, they had in there you had to have a backup generator. So you have to go out and spend $10,000 or $15,000 to sell a few birds a year. That's why now, when this started a year ago, the proposed rules was if you had more than four breeding females, whether they were productive or not, you were going to have to be licensed. And if they'd have stuck with that, it would have been pretty rough. But then USDA and the comments, and speaking as breeders and all, they came up with this system of some exclusions. The 200 and the 8 going by body size, but that's why some would not want to be inspected. I know somebody, the USDA looked him in the eyes face to face and said he was going to have to be inspected because he's a TikToker and he receives money for that. And he's got 20 or 30 birds in his house. All his birds are in his house. He doesn't want to have to be inspected because USDA is going to have to physically come in his house, in his bird room, and inspect. USDA said he was going to have to be inspected, but they also have told us they did not want to have to be going in people's houses. There are a lot of people that raise birds in their houses. So they're just examples why you wouldn't want to be inspected.
And then we've got Carrie Allen at Bird Gardens who says they have 2 licenses. This is just one more. And so, I mean, honestly, people shouldn't stress about this. Like I said, it's a lot of it is common sense. A lot of it is things that you have been doing for years and years that you just haven't documented. Documentation catches up with a lot of us, as far as making sure we've got everything written down. And when you've been doing it for a long time, that writing it down doesn't come as second nature because you've done it for so long, and you're just like, okay, yeah, I got this. I've definitely got this. And Jennifer asked, are they working on a flow chart or visual for licensing? One of the videos does have a step-by-step, but I think, honestly, Jennifer, if you take a look at just those pages, watch the videos, it will walk you through the process. Um, you know, and Shelley says she doesn't fall short on care, but when you bring them in, they have dumb stuff that they expect. Her rescues her home, so she's glad that she doesn't have to be regulated. And there are some people that it will absolutely feel like an invasion of your space, or you've been providing quality husbandry and care and all that for years, and suddenly now they're saying you need to be regulated. But I think honestly, really, I don't think this is something that people need to
What
be freaking out about.
what's going to get some people is this pet bird list. So you might be exempt on everything, and you take in one hawk head to sell that hawk head. If you do anything other than just flat out give it away, I guess you're going to have to be
Yeah.
licensed, or you're going to have to consider yourself a retail, and you could sell all the birds but the hawk head. But a pet store can't sell a hawk head unless they add it to this list. So, and I just keep picking on hawk heads, and I got a list here of every bird that we think that's kept in aviculture in the U.S. and it's a lot of birds. And then we all think in terms of citizens, parrots, but there are a lot of birds that are not on this list, that are not citizens, not parrots, and
No.
um, so it it
There are a
it
lot of
it could,
corvids. I mean,
yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of people see
Robin asked me
corvids
about
as
that. Yeah, I don't see corvids on there unless maybe by some slim chance they might fit them in as with raptors. I don't know, but at this point they're not. Uh,
but they're
it says
not, and they're not
poultry
raptors.
on, yeah, says
Yeah.
poultry on under here for pets. So if you raise silky chickens and sell them for pets, um, you know, you better have the small ones under 250 grams. Uh, so, yep, they got poultry on both lists there. Some of
Yeah.
the good stuff is like macaws, grays, eclectus, Amazons, cockatoos, hornbills, toucans. When they look in uh, Taracos, the way they got those listed, that's a whole family. So that's all cockatoos,
Right.
all your grays, which is only a couple, macaws, eclectus, all the species of eclectus, all the macaws, large and smalls on these lists. So that helps out a lot there. But what we don't want to see is somebody this is their hobby and their passion having to get inspected. And during our talks with USDA, we kept bringing up about the show community. Um, Nearly everybody that shows birds breeds birds, and they said, well, the bird shows are being exempted. Well, the breeders weren't, because at that point they were talking about if you had 4 breeding females, anybody that shows birds has more than 4 breeding females. So, you know, uh, with this 200 in there, that's the exemption for them, because most of your show
All
people
right.
are their birds under 250 grams.
And Ashley says her concern is breeding season, that her birds, will panic even if her husband walks into the aviary, let alone a stranger. And they break eggs because he was there. I mean, these are things that I think, unfortunately, with time, the inspectors will become familiar
There's
with.
exclusions. There's exclusions for that. So
Yeah.
um, also, most aviculturists are part-time aviculturists and they got a full-time real job. You could give your schedule to USDA so that they can schedule the unannounced inspections um, uh, around your schedule. The same thing with breeding season. It is even got exclusions in there for cleaning. So like it says your nest box have to be clean. Well, that's good when it's not breeding season, but if you got chicks in there, that a lot of our chicks, or macaw chicks, we don't pull till they're 8 weeks old. Those nest boxes can get kind of dirty. And we've got a system now where we can clean them out twice a week, but as the birds get older, they get dirty. But they even got exclusions in there for the breeding season, for cleaning, and for coming into your aviary. So um, you know, and I understand exactly what Ashley's saying, because sometimes I go into my building in breeding season and I quickly leave because the birds aren't used to me. They're used to the feeders being there, other people.
Yeah. All right. I think, Buddy, we're going to have to call it at this point. Is there any final words of Buddy wisdom that you'd like to share?
No, anybody got any further questions? It's probably best to contact me on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook, get in touch with Robin. She'll give them my cell number and call me. And if I can help anybody and head them in the right direction, all the major organizations are involved with this. American Federation of Aviculture, Agricultural Society of America, OPA. David Garcia has taken the lead on this. Steve Duncan's helped him with a lot. Next Friday, there's part 3 of this, and I think there's going to be more information coming out. David's going, and maybe Steve's going to have some more information coming out. So next week, but USDA's been changing a lot of this to where it's a little bit more practical, and also, and we'll live through this. We had the same concerns with the introduction of the Wild Bird Conservation Act and other stuff years ago, so we'll make it through this.
And I think too, I mean, Buddy, people on here, are saying that they're going to have to spread the word, review and spread the word. And I think that's important. That, I know there were a lot of you on here from different types of aviculture, and really share it with your colleagues, share it with the other people who are doing the same kind of things that you're doing, and get together and work as a group to come up with a plan. You've got a plan. It doesn't have, because your aviary is in 2 towns over, it doesn't mean that your plan has to be different from somebody else's. If you're housing the same species, then you can do the same thing. I don't think anybody's going to get faulted for copying a plan. I think it's a matter of sharing the information and really working as a community, breeders, rescues, sanctuaries, private owners, really working together. And I know we don't always do that. We don't. Let's be honest. We throw up our personal beliefs, and we sometimes forget about what we're all in this for, is that welfare piece for the birds. And so let's kind of work together on this, really make it happen, make it so that it's not that avicultural community, because that's what it will be. It's not going to be just your aviary, it's not going to be just your rescue, it's going to be the whole community. So
Robin,
if you guys can share. Yep.
There are going to be vets coming out being attending veterinarians. Your attending veterinarian does not have to be in your local area or your state. That's so your attending veterinarian could be in Florida or California, but I know that there are 2 or 3 veterinarians that are planning on doing this. They're writing animal care plans. So your attending veterinarian, if they're in another state, all they have to do is approve the inspections by your local vet or vet technician, somebody they approve. So don't try to write these programs on your own. There are going to be some out there available. I don't have the information. Do I give it to you? It's already 2 vets that I know of that are writing programs right now. And both vets are doing this for other animals.
And actually, Nick and I are working on some enrichment programming and planning for people. Excuse me, and something that should make that easier. And I can tell you guys, for years I've been doing enrichment plans for zoos, not just for birds, but for birds and mammals. And they're not the brain surgery or the rocket surgery, rocket science that we're making it out to be. So we can get this done, you guys. So
Oh,
thank you,
oh,
buddy.
Robert reminded us your vet doesn't have to be an avian vet.
Right, right. So just a couple reminder. Thank you, buddy. Always a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Appreciate
And
it. Appreciate it.
and anytime we'll have you back again. I just want to let you guys know I am going to be on the road next weekend or next Friday, so there won't be a live stream next Friday night. But on Sunday, I will be at the Exotic Bird Expo in Stuart, Florida. I'll be speaking about how human perception impacts our response to animal behavior. I'm kind of excited to be there, so come by and see me if you're in Florida. It should be fun. And then also, I want to remind you guys, Parrot Festival 2024. I know that's way far away, but it is the 25th anniversary of NPRPF's Parrot Festival, and they will be their registration is already open. So go sign up for Parrot Festival, and I will see you guys there. And finally, do we have another? Oh no, we didn't have another one. But lots of good stuff going on. Things are kind of happening again, and it's really exciting. So get out there, do the best for your birds, think about animal welfare and everything that you do. And as always, if you guys have any topics that you would like to hear about, you'd like to see me have a guest on, we can definitely look into that. I will let you know, coming up at the end of the month, I am going to have the author of a book called The Secret Perfume of Birds, which is pretty cool. It's about olfactory sensation in birds. So that will be on at the end of March. And otherwise, let me know what you want to hear about. And you guys take care. And thank you again for listening to Friday Night Flock Talk. Have a good weekend or a good week. Bye bye.